Why did Yoshi leave The Chosen? Fans around the world have asked this question again and again. One day he was there, loved and celebrated for his role, and the next, he was suddenly gone. No big announcements, no dramatic farewell on screen, just silence, confusion, and rumors. When someone who played such an important role disappears, it leaves a hole, not just in the story, but in the hearts of the people watching. And that's why today, we're going to look at what really happened. Not just the official statements, not just the guesses floating around online, but the bigger picture, the truth behind why Yoshi left The Chosen. To understand why Yoshi's departure was so shocking, we first have to look back at what he meant to the series. The Chosen was not just another show. It grew from a small project into something massive, with millions of people around the world following it. And at the heart of this success were the actors who brought the story to life. Among them, Yoshi stood out. His presence wasn't just about delivering lines. It was about giving a face and soul to a character that people connected with deeply. Every time he appeared on screen, there was a sense of honesty and vulnerability that fans could feel. That kind of connection isn't built overnight. It certainly isn't forgotten when it's suddenly gone. Yoshi's role carried weight. It's not just within the show's narrative, but also in its emotional core. For many viewers, he represented a kind of raw humanity. People related to him, trusted him, and felt comforted by his performance. This is why his sudden exit didn't feel like just another casting change. It felt personal. Fans who invested hours, even years into watching The Chosen, found themselves asking, what happened? Why did someone who seemed so rooted in the project disappear so suddenly? Another thing to consider is how The Chosen wasn't simply entertainment for its audience. It still is, a spiritual and emotional experience. The show carries themes of faith, sacrifice, and personal struggle. And many viewers see themselves reflected in its characters. When Yoshi left, it felt like more than an actor stepping away. It felt like a disruption of something sacred, something people had allowed into their daily lives and even into their own beliefs. That's why his departure carried so much weight. It wasn't about losing an actor. It was about losing a piece of what made the show special. This is why the first whispers of his exit spread so quickly. Online communities lit up with questions. Social media posts appeared almost instantly. People were not only curious, they were emotionally invested. For some, the news felt like betrayal. For others, it felt like heartbreak. And for a smaller group, it sparked a hope that maybe, just maybe, he would return. But no matter how they reacted, one thing was clear. Yoshi's absence created a storm of emotions that could not be ignored. When a show builds a strong bond with its audience, changes behind the scenes become personal for the fans. They aren't just updates on casting, they're shocks to the system. And Yoshi's exit proved just how deep that connection ran. To move forward with our story, we need to explore what was said officially. What reasons were given? Were they the full story, or just the surface of something much deeper? That's where we go next. When Yoshi left The Chosen, the first thing people wanted to know was, what did the creators have to say about it? In situations like this, official explanations are often the first place fans look, hoping to find clarity. And indeed, statements were given, but they didn't provide the full sense of closure people were craving. They explained the basics, but the words left space for questions, for doubts, and for theories to grow. The official reason presented to the public was careful. It was spoken in polite tones, worded in a way that sounded respectful, but at the same time felt incomplete. There were hints about scheduling conflicts, mentions of creative directions, or even personal reasons that weren't fully laid out. And while those words were enough to confirm that Yoshi was truly gone, they didn't explain the heart of the matter. Why now? Why so suddenly? Why in a way that felt unprepared, both for the fans and for the storyline? In the entertainment industry, this kind of careful wording is not unusual. When a beloved actor leaves, especially from a project as big as The Chosen, producers walk a fine line. They don't want to upset fans. They don't want to damage the reputation of the show. And most importantly, they don't want to reveal private struggles that might not be theirs to share. So, they give the kind of explanation that is polite, diplomatic, and safe. But the problem is, safe explanations rarely satisfy. Curious minds, fans quickly realized that the words given to them felt more like a surface-level cover than a deep answer. Yes, they had something official, but it didn't feel like the truth. It didn't answer the why in a way that spoke to the heart. People were told, in effect, that Yoshi was gone and that the show would move on. But for a community that had grown attached to him, moving on wasn't so simple. They wanted details. They wanted honesty. And most of all, they wanted reassurance that his departure didn't mean something darker was happening behind the scenes. But official statements rarely give reassurance. They open more doors than they close. Soon after the announcement, fans began comparing notes online. They replayed interviews Yoshi had given in the past, looking for clues. They studied moments from behind-the-scenes videos to see if they could spot tension. And in this search for answers, the gap between what was said publicly and what people felt privately grew even wider. That gap created a turning point. Because when people aren't satisfied with the official explanation, they create their own. This is where rumors take root, where theories begin to spread, where the narrative starts to live a life of its own outside of the truth. The polite words given by the show were no longer enough. Fans wanted the unpolished story, one that wasn't written in a press release but whispered in backstage hallways. And that brings us to the heart of the matter. If the official version didn't fully explain Yoshi's departure, what could have been happening behind the scenes? Was there tension with the producers? Was the weight of the role too heavy to carry? Or was there a personal choice, one too private to share in a public statement? To understand this, we need to step beyond what was said in front of cameras and take a closer look at what may have been happening when the cameras were off. Every story has two sides, the one told in the spotlight and the one whispered in the shadows. When it comes to Yoshi's departure from The Chosen, many fans couldn't help but wonder if the truth lay somewhere backstage, away from the polished explanations. The entertainment world is filled with stories of conflicts. We never see arguments in meeting rooms, creative disagreements, and the pressure of carrying a character that millions of people have grown attached to. Could it be that something similar was happening here? Working on a project as large as The Chosen is not easy. Behind the moving performances and inspiring messages lies a world of long days, high expectations, and relentless schedules. Actors are expected to give not just their talent, but also their time, their energy, and often even parts of their personal lives. Yoshi was no stranger to this weight. His role wasn't small, and every moment he appeared on screen carried responsibility. When a character becomes central to the story, the actor portraying them shoulders both the praise and the pressure. Sometimes that pressure builds quietly until it becomes too heavy to ignore. There are also the unavoidable creative disagreements that exist in every production. Directors may want to push a scene in one direction while the actor feels it should go another. Writers may adjust a character's arc in a way that doesn't sit well with the performer who has lived inside that role. It's not always explosive. Sometimes it's subtle, a look, a tone, an unspoken frustration. But when left unresolved, these little cracks can widen into something unfixable. Fans began to wonder, did Yoshi face a similar struggle with the direction of his character? Did he feel the story was moving away from what he believed in? Beyond creative visions, there's the question of relationships on set. Every production is like a family, but even families have conflicts. When you spend countless hours with the same people, day after day, tension is bound to appear. It doesn't always mean betrayal or dramatic fights. Sometimes it's simply exhaustion, misunderstandings, or differences in personality. Yet in a project as meaningful and intense as The Chosen, even small conflicts can feel magnified. Another possibility is the pressure from outside the set. The Chosen isn't just a show, it's a phenomenon with a devoted global audience. That means every decision, every performance, every personal moment is under a microscope. Yoshi may have felt the weight of not only pleasing the directors but also meeting the expectations of millions of fans. For some, that kind of constant attention fuels passion. For others, it quietly drains them until the joy of acting begins to fade. The truth about behind-the-scenes tensions is that they rarely reveal themselves in official announcements. They stay hidden in closed rooms and private conversations. What the audience sees is the polished version. But behind the curtain, there are emotions, hurt, exhaustion, sometimes disappointment that shape the choices we later see as sudden or unexplained. Yoshi's exit may not have been the result of one dramatic incident. It could have been the slow buildup of many small tensions, each adding to the other until the decision to leave became the only path forward. And so, while fans searched for a single dramatic reason, the real truth might be more subtle, but no less powerful. The pressures of the set, creative clashes and human struggles blending together into a choice that, though painful, felt necessary. But tensions on set are only one piece of the puzzle. Because when an actor steps away, there are often personal battles being fought far away from the lights and cameras. Battles that cannot be explained in a press release. That is where we turn next. Sometimes the biggest battles are not the ones fought on a set or in a script meeting. They are the battles happening quietly in private, where no cameras are rolling and no fans are watching. When Yoshi left The Chosen, many wondered if the real reasons had less to do with production and more to do with personal struggles. After all, actors are not just characters, they are human beings, carrying their own burdens, responsibilities. In dreams, the world often forgets that behind the bright lights and applause, actors live normal lives filled with challenges that can weigh heavier than any role. Yoshi may have been admired on screen, but off-screen he could have been facing commitments that pulled him in another direction. Perhaps family needed him more than the show did. Perhaps health, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, demanded his attention in ways the public could not see. These are the kinds of reasons that are rarely shared openly, because they are deeply personal, but they are also some of the most powerful. The Chosen. While a project of faith and passion, is also an enormous responsibility. To commit to years of filming means putting other parts of life on hold. Birthdays, family milestones, moments of rest all are sacrificed in the name of storytelling. For some actors, that sacrifice feels worth it. For others, especially over time, the cost becomes too high. Yoshi may have reached a point where he asked himself whether he could keep giving so much of himself to the role while still being present for the people and commitments outside the screen. There is also the question of spiritual and personal growth. The Chosen isn't just entertainment. It carries deep messages that touch the lives of millions. To be part of such a show means constantly being placed under the weight of expectation, not just as an actor, but as a person. Fans often blur the lines between the performer and the role, expecting them to live up to the same values their character embodies. That kind of pressure can be overwhelming. Perhaps Yoshi needed space to rediscover his own path, separate from the one the show had drawn for him. And let's not forget the toll of mental health. The entertainment industry has a way of draining even the strongest individuals. Long hours, public attention, the fear of making mistakes, and the inability to truly rest it all builds quietly. Many actors have stepped away from projects not because they lacked passion, but because they needed to protect their well-being. Could Yoshi's departure have been a choice of preservation rather than abandonment? A decision to step back before the weight became too much to bear? Fans may never hear a full confession of these struggles. Perhaps they shouldn't. Some truths belong only to the person living them. What matters is recognizing that sometimes leaving isn't a sign of weakness, but of strength, the strength to choose healing, balance, and peace over constant performance. Yoshi may have left The Chosen, but in doing so, he might have chosen something greater. His health, his family, his possibilities. Remind us that his story is more than headlines or fan theories. It's a reminder that behind every beloved character is a person who deserves space to breathe, grow, and take care of themselves. And while personal struggles may explain part of the story, there was also another storm happening at the same time. The voices of the fans themselves, who reacted with shock, heartbreak, and speculation. That's the next chapter we must uncover. When the news of Yoshi's departure first spread, the internet didn't stay quiet for even a moment. Fans rushed to social media, comment sections, and forums, each carrying their own feelings, their own questions, and their own theories. Some wrote with heartbreak, unable to imagine The Chosen without him. Others responded with anger, demanding to know the real reason behind the exit. And then there were those who whispered their hope. Maybe this was temporary. Maybe he'd return. Maybe this was just a pause, not an ending. The reactions weren't just words on a screen, they were waves of emotion. Hashtags began trending. Posts with photos of Yoshi's character flooded timelines, paired with long captions about how much he meant to people. Some fans admitted they cried when they heard the news. Others said they felt betrayed, as though the show had taken something away without warning. To them, this wasn't about losing an actor. It was about losing a part of their own journey with the story. And then came the theories. The official explanation wasn't enough, so fans filled the silence with their own answers. Some believed there were secret disagreements between Yoshi and the show's leadership, pointing to tiny details in past interviews or behind-the-scenes clips as evidence. Others thought the decision was personal family, faith, or health pulling him away. A few even wondered if his departure was part of a larger plan, a surprise twist the creators might reveal later. Every theory, no matter how unlikely, spread quickly, because in the absence of clarity, people will create their own truths. But not all the reactions were negative. Many fans chose compassion. They wrote messages of support, saying things like, "If Yoshi needed to step away, I respect him for putting his life first." Some reminded others that being part of a project as demanding as The Chosen can take a toll, and that no actor owes the audience their entire life. These voices didn't shout as loudly as the angry ones, but they carried a different kind of strength, empathy. Still, the division among the fans became impossible to ignore. On one side were those who felt abandoned, who blamed the show or even Yoshi himself. On the other were those who respected his choice and defended him fiercely online. The debates grew heated, and in some corners of the internet, entire communities fractured over this one departure. That's how deeply he had impacted the audience. His absence was strong enough to shake not just the story of The Chosen, but also the unity of its fan base. The theories, however, refused to die. Even weeks later, people were still analyzing his last scenes, convinced there were hidden clues about his exit. Every word, every expression, every piece of news around the show became fuel for speculation. It became clear that Yoshi's departure wasn't just an event, it had become a mystery, one that fans were determined to solve, even if they never would. But beyond reactions and theories lies the undeniable truth. The show itself was forever changed. Characters can be recast, stories can be rewritten. But the absence of someone who shaped the heart of a role leaves scars that are not easily healed. The next question is not only about Yoshi, but about The Chosen itself. How did the show carry on after such a loss? And what did his absence mean for the story going forward? That's where we go next, when Yoshi left. The Chosen didn't just lose an actor, lost a presence that had helped anchor its soul. In a series built on deep themes of faith, loyalty, and transformation, every role matters. But some roles carry a weight that is difficult to replace. Yoshi's character wasn't just part of the story. He was part of the show's heartbeat. His absence forced the production team to face a painful reality. How do you continue telling a story when one of its voices is suddenly gone? Writers had to adapt quickly. Storylines that were meant to stretch across seasons suddenly needed to be reshaped. Dialogue written with Yoshi's character in mind was left on the cutting room floor. Entire emotional arcs and moments that could have defined the future of the series were now rewritten or reassigned to other characters. On the surface, the episodes carried on. But for those who knew the original plan, the shift was unmistakable. The rhythm of the story had changed. For the cast, the impact went beyond scripts. Working together day after day builds bonds, and Yoshi had been part of that family. His sudden absence left an empty chair on set, and the silence of that absence was felt not only by fans but also by those who had shared scenes, laughter, and struggles with him. Cast members have spoken about how filming The Chosen is not like any ordinary job. It is immersive, emotional, and demanding. To lose someone in the middle of that journey was a wound that couldn't simply be ignored. And then there was the audience. Fans don't just watch characters. They attach themselves to them. Yoshi's character had become a companion, a guide, a familiar presence that comforted viewers across the world. When he vanished from the screen, it left a gap that no amount of clever writing or recasting could instantly fill. Viewers noticed the difference. Some said the show felt slightly less alive. Others struggled to accept anyone else stepping into his shoes. The truth is, when an actor gives life to a character, they leave a mark that can't simply be copied. Yet, despite the loss, the show pushed forward. The Chosen was never about one person. It was about the larger message, the bigger story. But even so, Yoshi's departure tested the resilience of both the creators and the community. It became a lesson in adaptation. In learning how to move forward without forgetting the past, the impact also stretched beyond the screen. Interviews, press events, and promotional campaigns now carried a shadow. Questions about Yoshi's absence lingered in every room. Even when the cast and crew tried to steer the conversation elsewhere, The Chosen had grown into a movement, and every movement depends on trust. When Yoshi left, that trust was shaken, and the show had to work harder to remind its audience that the story was still worth following. In the end, Chosen continued, but it continued differently. Every episode without Yoshi became a reminder of how fragile even the strongest productions can be. His departure became part of the show's history, one of those turning points that fans will always remember. It's not because it was planned, but because it was real. And while the impact on the story was undeniable, it also pointed to something even bigger, the reality that actors, like all of us, must sometimes make choices for their own lives, no matter how much it hurts those who are watching. And that leads us to the final part of this journey, the bigger picture. Because Yoshi's exit is not just about one actor or one show. It's about what it means when life collides with art and when real human choices reshape the stories we thought we knew. In the end, Yoshi's departure from The Chosen is about more than a casting change. It is a reminder that behind every performance, behind every character we love, there is a real person with real struggles, real dreams, and real limits. Audiences often see actors as extensions of the roles they play, forgetting that the weight of expectation can press down harder than any script ever could. Yoshi's choice to step away, whether born from conflict, exhaustion, or personal needs, speaks to a truth that reaches far beyond one show. Sometimes art must give way to life. The entertainment world is filled with stories like this, moments where beloved figures walk away. Not because they don't care, but because they care too much about preserving something bigger, their health, their relationships, their identity. And every time it happens, audiences are reminded that the stories they treasure are built not only on creativity, but also on sacrifice. To walk away from something so loved is not easy. It takes courage, and it leaves echoes that fans feel long after the credits roll. For The Chosen, the loss of Yoshi became part of its larger journey. The show carried on, adapting and evolving, but the absence became a scar etched into its history. Fans will remember where they were when they heard he left. They will remember the theories, the heartbreak, and the debates. But they will also remember the performances he gave, the moments he brought to life, and the emotions he stirred within them. Those can never be taken away, no matter how the story changes. The bigger picture here is that every departure is also a lesson. It teaches fans not to take their favorite actors for granted. It teaches creators that audiences crave honesty as much as storytelling. And it teaches us all that sometimes the bravest choice a person can make is to walk away, even when the world is begging them to stay. So when people ask, why did Yoshi leave The Chosen? The answer may never be fully known. It may not be a single reason, but a blend of many a storm of professional, personal, and emotional choices that led him to step away. And maybe that's how it should be. Because the truth isn't always found in headlines or press releases. Sometimes the truth belongs only to the person living it. But what we do know is this: Yoshi's time on The Chosen left a mark that will never fade. His role touched hearts, inspired conversations, and became part of a story bigger than himself. Even though he left, his presence continues to live on in every scene he gave, every emotion he sparked, and every fan who still remembers him with love. The story of Yoshi's departure is not just the story of a show losing an actor. It is the story of what happens when art and life collide when the needs of a human being rise above the demands of a role. And while the chapters of The Chosen continue to be written, this chapter reminds us of something we should never forget. Behind every performance is a person. Sometimes, their story matters most of all.